Well, today marks the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, making landfall in Louisiana and Mississippi. You're looking live at New Orleans right now, a city that has done a lot to rebuild in the past 2 decades. All week, there have been events in New Orleans to honor those who died and highlight the city's recovery. Let's take a look back here on August 29th, 2005. The Category 3 hurricane made landfall, causing widespread devastation and flooding. That triggered a humanitarian disaster that claimed nearly 1,400 lives. This video shows all of the homes underwater and people being rescued from the floods, many of them off of the roofs of their homes. As many as 30,000 people who were ordered to evacuate went to the Superdome for shelter. But when Katrina made landfall, it tore open part of the roof and rain started pouring into the stadium. The drinking water was limited, much of the stadium was left without power, and plumbing began to fail. There were even reports of rapes and deaths inside. Well, video shows the chaos at another shelter at the New Orleans Convention Center. It did not suffer structural damage, but there also was no power there, and water and supplies were running thin. Well, former meteorologist Bryan Schuerman is here now to kind of walk us backwards and how this all happened. You were tracking it. That was one of the first hurricanes you covered, I believe.
In 2005, I was an intern for WLWT, the NBC affiliate in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I grew up. And working with my friend John, who was a meteorologist there at the time, I still talk to him to this day. Their sister station was WDSU, the NBC affiliate in New Orleans. And we were seeing the video feeds come into the station there in Cincinnati from New Orleans as this system was starting to play out. We knew that this was going to be a major system. It had reached Category 5 strength, winds of 165 to 170 miles an hour. Before it started to weaken a little bit, when it started to reach southern Louisiana, that's why it made landfall as a Category 3 and actually made 2 landfalls, one in the southern marshland, then one is that you get closer toward the New Orleans metro. This storm is the one that pretty much changed how we look at tropical systems. It changed some internal policies and procedures with the National Weather Service, the National Hurricane Center, just because of the magnitude, because people were comparing this storm to Hurricane Camille of 1969. And we, at least in the meteorology world, we remember Katrina because of Camille and Camille's damage that was left behind in the southern Gulf Coast. Let's go to graphics here. This is the overall track of Hurricane Katrina. It developed over portions of the southwestern Caribbean, then started to strengthen and move off to the north and west and turn and make its first landfall in portions of southern Florida between Miami and Fort Lauderdale as a Category 1 hurricane with winds of 75 miles an hour. Then going over into the Gulf of Mexico, we started to see that northwesterly turn and taking it right into southwestern Louisiana. Obviously, the Gulf of Mexico had lots of moisture to work with, so this system rapidly intensified. You can see there top winds 170 miles an hour with this system and over 1,700 fatalities from this system. What we remember with this system is some of the eerie messages that were coming out from the National Weather Service in New Orleans prior to Katrina's landfall. So this was August 28th, yesterday, reading from that statement, quote, "Devastating damage expected. Hurricane Katrina, a most powerful hurricane with unprecedented strength, rivaling the intensity of Hurricane Camille of 1969. Most of the area will be uninhabitable for weeks, perhaps longer. At least 1/2 of well-constructed homes will have roof and wall failure." The statement continues to say high-rise office and apartment buildings will sway dangerously, a few to the point of total collapse. All windows will blow out. Airborne debris will be widespread and may include heavy items such as household appliances and even light vehicles. Persons, pets, and livestock exposed to the winds will face certain death if struck. Power outages will last for weeks, perhaps longer. Most power poles will be down and transformers destroyed. Water shortages will make human suffering incredible by modern standards. The statement continues to say few crops will remain. Livestock left exposed to the winds will be killed. An inland hurricane wind warning is issued when winds of at least hurricane strength are expected within 12 to 24 hours. Once tropical storm and hurricane force winds onset, do not venture outside. At the same time as Katrina was making landfall, we started to see tornado warnings warnings come out. We would expect it with the outer bands, but these were for the eye wall and also for the damage that was coming out. This tornado warning issued on the 29th today. This was for portions of Jefferson, Lafourche, Orleans, Plaquemine, St. Bernard, and St. Charles parishes for, as you can see there, many reports coming in stating total structural failure in the New Orleans metro area. You're seeing some of the video there, and that was just one of numerous tornado warnings. But then we had the flash flood warnings that were coming out for the levee breaches. The lower 9th ward, which was inundated with feet and feet of water. When evacuation orders were coming out, officials were saying if you are staying in your house, take an axe with you to break through your roof. We have not seen this ever since. We've had a lot of Category 5 storms, but Katrina pretty much set the benchmark for response moving forward. One of the new things that came out of it was the new extreme wind warning from the National Weather Service. That was because the Weather Service issued those tornado warnings for the eye wall. Now we have the extreme wind warning, which is used for landfalling tropical systems and the eye wall for winds of at least Category 3 strength. And then the modeling and the data has gotten better since this as well. And we know that emergency responders have learned lessons from this that they're using. Contraflow plans, earlier evacuations. I know was watching some coverage this morning, and then another friend of mine I worked with down in Cincinnati, John, he worked at WWL and actually evacuated, and his son was born today when Katrina was making landfall.
Really?
Yep, I saw the pictures he posted on social this morning. He was changing his first diaper in the back of a car as they were evacuating north to his wife's family up in Cincinnati. So this is a storm that we will never forget. It is the benchmark. 20 years later, now we look back. How does this compare to Katrina? But now we've got other named storms that rival. That 2005 season, we had 3 major storms: Katrina, Rita, and one more. I forget. I'm thinking of the name here. Wilma.
Yes.
All back to back to back that were facing the Gulf Coast there. So lots of lessons learned, lots of reflecting going on down in the Gulf Coast and across the nation with meteorologists too, because we always talk about how could we do things different? How could things be better?
And I think one of the biggest things, takeaways at least, is that those evacuation orders are there for a reason.
Exactly.
You know, there were so many people who said that's not going to be that
No.
bad.
And then the one thing I know the challenge was with the city of New Orleans, there was something written in the code that they were not allowed to issue a mandatory evacuation. They had to go back and rewrite something, and I know that's why the Governor Blanco at the time was working with the Mayor Ray Nagin, on how could they issue a mandatory evacuation for the city of New Orleans to get people out. Since then, you know, they've done a lot with busing and everything. A few years later, they had another storm that headed that way. It was a whole night and day difference on getting people out of that city, because keep in mind, New Orleans technically sits below sea level. And those pumps are critical to getting water out of the city. And when you're looking at a storm like Katrina, all the electric's gone. Those pumps aren't going to be getting that water out of the city. And when you get those levee breaches like that, that water is just coming in so fast and so hard. There's just nothing you can do to mitigate it at that point. So.
Okay, Brian, thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Kind of forget some of the things that happened 20 years ago.
And it's good that we remember and share the lessons we've learned from storms like Katrina, just because of the impact it has made on not only southern Louisiana, Gulf Coast, and the state, but the entire country in our emergency response and preparedness to storms like Katrina.
All right, Brian.
Thank you,
sir.